Before cancer, I took everything for granted. You take your days for granted. You really do. You know, before cancer, I just lived my life like, I was a believer, and, we brought our kids to church and we taught them about God. But when you know that your days might be limited, you do think about things so much differently.
Here you are looking at your life, having all these plans of where you're going to go and what you're going to do, and it all flashes in front of you in an instant. And you realize that probably none of that stuff is ever going to happen. And just facing death and hearing those words, "you have cancer," really changes a person.
When I first heard I had cancer, I saw it like the Hollywood sign, it was huge. But then I thought, okay, I have a God that's bigger than this.
My life took a very bizarre turn, and I said, wow, God, I don't know what you're doing here. But my life now has shifted from music and missions and ministry to a mission field I never expected to be in. Doctors, hospitals, medical personnel, and sick people.
When we think about cancer, we think of the way that oftentimes it's diagnosed, and sometimes it really is the patient who complains of something, a sign or a symptom. And so oftentimes we know cancer can cause a patient to feel tired, or to cause them to have a decreased appetite, to lose weight. We think of how cancer can affect the immune system, and so patients might have fevers or night sweats and things like that.
When I was 21 years old, I really just started noticing some significant changes in my health. And through that, I started going to the doctor. And I had lost about 40 pounds over the course of a year. And every night when I'd go to sleep, I'd try to fall asleep, but I was in so much pain that I couldn't. And I had these pains that were coming from my hip bones, and they just kept throbbing and throbbing, and every night I would have night sweats, and that went on for a period of about 9 months. And I was just really lacking in energy. My appetite wasn't there. I was very pale. And over the course of a week, after being sick for about a year, I had these lymph nodes that swelled up in my neck. And through that process, I ended up going to see a surgeon, and they ended up drawing some fluid out of my neck, and the test came back that was still, they said, cancer-free. And so I really thought I was going to pass away, that I wasn't going to really make it to see tomorrow because of such bad shape that I was in. And it almost got to the point where it was so difficult for me that I really struggled with wondering, was there even something mentally wrong with me? Because I knew something wasn't right, but I couldn't explain it to others, and the doctors couldn't figure it out. So during the time, they took out a couple of lymph nodes from my neck, and they figured out that yes, cancer is what I was dealing with. And I was most likely in the most advanced stage, had the symptoms of stage 4B of Hodgkin's lymphoma for about 9 months before the cancer was even found.
I started having some symptoms. I started having some pain in my side, and I went to the doctor, and they did an ultrasound, and they thought I had actually a mass on my ovary. So my husband was getting ready. He was in training. He was getting ready to be deployed to Afghanistan. They said, we need to get this out. But that whole year as my husband was gone, I was still having a lot of symptoms, a lot of pain pain that was waking me up in the middle of the night. I decided to go back into the doctor, and I told him that I wanted to have a hysterectomy. So when I had my surgery, he went in, and it looked like a fibroid, and I had it done laparoscopically. Unfortunately, having that done laparoscopically, when he was taking it out of me, it spilled open. So I actually had cancer cells spill inside of me. He said the good thing is they're not saying sarcoma, so we won't have the results for a couple days. So I had to go home, and those were really, really hard days for me. I think it was probably 3 or 4 days I had to wait. And I said, when you find out, I want you to call me, and I want you to tell me on the phone. So I was home alone, and I got the phone call. Sorry. And he said, Sherry, it is cancer. Can you and your husband come in right away?
Very strange. I was shaving one day and I felt a little lump in my throat, right about here. And I thought, I'll keep an eye on it. I waited for maybe a month and it wasn't going away. In fact, I thought maybe it was getting a little bigger. So I mentioned to my wife, and we decided we better go to the doctor. So I went to my family doctor. He sent me to the specialist, the ear, throat, and mouth specialist. And they decided to do a biopsy on it. And when they did, I got a call at work actually and told me it's cancer.
I had been privileged to do missions work, and I was in Guatemala for some time, many years ago, and came back with some nasty bugs in my system. And for the next 20 years or so, I had various physical ailments and issues that I would go to the doctor, and they really couldn't put their finger on anything. In the fall of 2010, a doctor said, well, you know what, I believe you have celiac disease. And so they did the blood test for celiac, and it showed positive. The determining test is an upper GI biopsy. When they did that upper GI biopsy, they said, wow, you're 50. Let's throw in a colonoscopy. But when they did that test, they found my first cancer, which was colorectal cancer. They found it just about to break through the wall and lining and explode into the rest of my body. So they caught it just in time. And I truly believe that in a strange way, celiac disease saved my life.
They're very fearful, they're very afraid. They've got the cancer word, and I've learned through the years that when you get the cancer word, automatically you think the D word, which is death, and that's not necessarily the case. And then automatically the family and the patients think, I got a timeline.
When I finally got the first, diagnosis of cancer, my life really just broke in front of me and flashed before me. And I wondered, how was I ever going to make it through tomorrow? And not knowing all the details, your head just starts to spin and your mind goes everywhere that it shouldn't. You face anger, like, why is this happening to me? Frustration, because you had been sick for so long and they finally figured out what it was. And you finally know what you're dealing with, but you don't have a plan. You don't know the team that's going to be with you, during this journey.
When Phil got diagnosed with cancer, obviously it was a shock. Nobody, especially a 20-year-old girl who's going to college, expects to hear that that's what their boyfriend's dealing with. So it was a shock. However, in my faith walk, I was comfortable knowing that God was in control and that we weren't. So I felt like I kind of knew what to do. I had the word in my heart, and I'd been prepared for any situation that came along.
Our patients come to us in so much fear, with so much fear and worry, and the enemy is so good at bringing in those types of emotions. It's such a blessing for me to be able to be that instrument where I can bring His hope into that and try to instead bring in God's comfort and His peace and His hope. I would say that definitely. And then being a nurse practitioner, being an instrument of healing and seeing God's healing and how he can work his healing through me, that is just a privilege and a blessing to be able to be a part of him as a healer.
So I called my pastor, Steve Luston from Kishwaukee Bible Church, and he prayed with me. And the whole time he said he was texting Rob. He finally got a hold of Rob. Rob came home, and it was just a weird, surreal feeling. You feel like you're in a dream, just kind of like the bottom falls out. So we go in, and he tells us, he's like, you have this type of cancer. It's a very, very rare type of uterine cancer. It's called leiomyosarcoma, and it's a very aggressive type of cancer. And he said, we can't treat you here for it. You're going to have to find a sarcoma specialist. So in those days afterwards, it was just kind of a blur.
She was in the hospital after that first surgery, and she called me and she was crying. She said, it's cancer. And we didn't think it was, so it was shocking. And I said, well, you know what, uterine cancer, the mortality rate is, it's good, you're going to be fine. People are cured all the time from uterine cancer. And then she called and she said, well, it's sarcoma and it's very rare and it's not, the odds aren't as good. So, it's so shocking. I mean, and being her older sister, I was very protective of her. So I want to run in and fix everything, and you can't.
And when I got the phone call that he had cancer, I just couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe it. I knew something was wrong, but I just never thought. And then they told me it was stage 4 cancer. Like, it wasn't just the beginning of cancer. He had stage 4 cancer, and they needed to remove those lumps right away. It's like, first you're in shock. You don't know how to deal with it. But then the next instinct was, okay, let's get this over. Let's start getting the ball moving. Let's call the doctor. So where does he have to go?
So I went through the chemo, the radiation, the surgery, more radiation. I went through a heartbreaking surgery because I ended up having to have a permanent colostomy, which is a bag that my bowel movements now come out my side into a little bag that's stuck onto just beside my belly button. That was probably my lowest moment when I woke up from that surgery. The minute I got that first cancer diagnosis, I felt the most overwhelming peace and strength. I felt his presence, his love enveloped me in a way that I had never experienced before. And so even in that low moment, I knew that it was going to be okay.
An important part was 3 weeks before it was all over, the treatment, I was at home by myself and I was washing up. I had my shirt off and I looked in the mirror, and it was like for the first time I actually looked at how I looked. And I remember thinking, you look like you're going to die. I looked like one of the pictures from the concentration camp. I didn't have any color in my face, and I broke down right then and there. Because I didn't have anything left to fight with. That's when I remembered the Holy Spirit put this vision in my head of that picture where there's 2 footprints in the sand, and then there's only 1 footprint. And he goes, why did you leave me to Jesus? And Jesus says, I didn't leave you, I carried you. So I thought, okay, this is what I do. So I said, I was crying, and I told him, I said, you have to carry me.
I have been a Christian for a long time, but to feel him actually carrying me through this was nothing I'd ever experienced in my life. And I could literally feel him at night, just like wrapped up in his arms. And the fact that I wasn't a crumpled mess on the floor. Yes, it was hard, and yes, I had dark days, and I still do. It's hard. But he's so real, and the peace he gives is so real.
We grieve when we're believers, but we don't grieve like the world grieves, because we do have that hope that that as we look around us and we look at the circumstances and we look at the what I like to say is the horizontal. When I am treating a believer, they know that that's temporary, and their focus is on the eternal, and they realize that God has allowed it for a reason. They may not know why, but they know that it's for His glory typically, and they know that something good is going to come out of it.
So I had my wedding set, things were going great at school, and then I got these pains back in my hips again. And I knew without a shadow of a doubt that it was exactly the same pains I had before, and those were symptoms of where the cancer was attached to my hip bones. And so I waited a few days, the pains got stronger, I called my doctor, and I absolutely dreaded calling him. And I told him what was going on, and he figured, the cancer most likely may have not gone away. And I remember hanging up the phone that time thinking to myself, I can't do this again. I told myself the first time when I went through it, there is no way I can walk this journey again. It was too difficult, it was too tough, and this has to be in my previous life. And so I went through a bunch of tests, and I got the news that the cancer had returned, or in fact had never been gone. And so when I found myself on my hospital bed, going through the same thing that I went through before, except now they said the treatment's going to be 10 times more aggressive to take care of, 100 times more of the effect. I struggled. It was the middle of the night, my dad was on the couch, and I was just screaming at the top of my lungs, God, I don't understand this, I'm so pissed off about it, and so upset. And it wasn't until the middle of the night one night when I was crying out to God in total anger that I gave that situation over to Him, and I said, I can't deal with this. You're going to have to take it. I know you're there. You promised to be by my side. All these promises are supposedly true, even though they don't seem like it, right now, as I'm facing fear and I'm facing death again. But when I finally let that go, I was able to have just this great peace of knowing, this is where I am. I can't change the circumstances that I'm going through. But what I can do is try to be positive.
There is a lot of I don't call it negative, but there is a lot of distress when you work in a cancer center. But on the other side of the coin, there is so much excitement in the hope that we see every single day. And when I run into a Christian patient, I find that their level of purpose and meaning is different. Like I can think of a patient that just recently died. She said to me, how do I go through this with my faith? She never really asked why. And it was a very touching testimony because she was very close to her faith. But I find when I do talk to other Christians, their faith is tested. They're going because they're faced with cancer, and then they think death, and they think timeline, and it's none of that. There's so much hope on the other side. That's what we like to show them. That's what I like to show them, that we're looking at the hope, and we're looking at that with the medicines they have today. And in the 21st century, people are living longer with stage 3 and 4 cancer than they ever have.
Who would know by looking at me that I've had 7 cancers? Apart from not having a lot of hair, being the hairless wonder, would you know? Can you see it? He's been so gracious. My family, I can't say enough about. I'm living with my parents, and they are old enough to be my parents, and so they're up in age, and yet they have sacrificially taken care of me physically, cooked for me when I couldn't cook, changed the sheets on my bed when I couldn't do that, done laundry, just been there for me. One of the things that has been amazing is that I know that one of the reasons that I'm walking through this, being able to hang on to my faith with the Lord, is that I've watched my parents walk through difficult situations with grace and trust and faith in the Lord, never wavering my whole life. God, obviously, first and foremost, but His people, family and friends, His people have poured out their love and support and help to us through this whole thing. And it has allowed me to feel loved by God and other people like I never have in my life.
We've been married for 38 years. When I was going through chemo and radiation, there would be days where I just didn't want anybody to even talk to me. And some days Sandra would come home and she goes, how are you doing? I'm like, I don't feel that great. And she would say, I'll give you a foot rub. And I'm like, I don't, a foot rub isn't gonna help me. And then she goes, oh, come on. And I let her. And that came to be the one thing that made me feel like I was still alive, is that little foot rub. And I would look at her. And I would think, she doesn't love me. I seen the church body in a different light. Everybody was, supporting me. Everybody was happy to see me. And they at one time, they all got together during service, they stopped it, and then they had me stand up, and they all were cheering and clapping and screaming for me. I never felt love like that in my life.
I have an awesome family. I have a very, very loving husband. I have 3 children. My daughter's 24. I have a son who's 17 and a son who's 14. And of course I have my sister. She's been huge in my journey, and I have 2 brothers. Also a huge part of my support system is my church family. They have been so wonderful through all of this, just the practical things, cleaning my house, taking my kids, making meals, and just the spiritual support that they have.
So when I was first diagnosed with cancer, I was dating my girlfriend, Carrie, and it was actually our 2-year dating anniversary. And she stood by my side during that entire time. And what was so amazing about that was not only did she practically live out of a suitcase of her car, but she was still going to school, she was working in the evenings, and she was coming to see me. I had a group of people who put a care package together for me, and they all signed their names to it. They said, I'm thinking about you and praying for you. To get that just act of love from a total stranger, it just puts you in a place where you realize you need help. So it symbolized that for me, and that I had help, people that were there. And then I had these individuals who would send me cards every week or show up at the hospital. And what I looked forward to was those cards of encouragement, knowing that I wasn't forgotten.
So you go in for a test and you're completely healthy or somewhat healthy, and you walk out thinking, oh my gosh, my life will never be the same. My life is completely transformed and changed. I don't know what it's going to be. I don't even know if I'll have a life for very long. That's the reality of getting that diagnosis. And so it really makes one think. We think about, where's our life going? What do I value? What is important? What is not important?
Every day we're not faced with, oh, we're going to die. Oh, sure, we may get hit in a car accident, or we may, something else may happen to us on the way home or something like that. But when you get here and you get the cancer diagnosis, it's an automatic. So it's almost like now they're faced with it. And the Christian or the non-Christian or the believer or the non-believer, they look at it like, wow, life is short. Oh my gosh, what do I do with this?
I went from thinking I had life completely together to now not even knowing what's going to happen tomorrow. And it's almost like you take a blank canvas, and if you look at your life on that canvas, it's always being painted. And it just gets more beautiful, I think, with time, when you realize that life is not about yourself, it's about reaching out to others.
The biggest thing, thinking back to when Phil had cancer, was I was just kind of having a good time, but I realized that you really, truly have to take every single day as a gift, and you can't take it for granted.
I'm in the prayer team at church, and I'm able to pray for people. And as soon as I hear that somebody has cancer, or a relative or a friend, I'm right there telling them, my story about having cancer, and asking them, can I pray for you? I need to let people know that, cancer doesn't mean you're going to die. And if you had cancer, you could still get back to where you were and you could become even better. I didn't want the enemy to take away anything I had. And before I got cancer, I ran. So Sandra found an organization called Cancer to 5K. And they take you, they buy you running shoes, they give you 12 weeks of training, and then they get somebody to run the race with you so you don't even run it by yourself. And I met so many wonderful cancer survivors through that. At the end of the race, I said, I'm standing on the throat of cancer now. I've defeated it through the help of Jesus, and I'm now standing on the throat of cancer, and I'll never let it up again. Now I want other people to know that they can do the same thing.
When you live with someone for so long, you think you know their thoughts all the time. You think you know how they're going to react, and so you kind of assume a lot of stuff. And then I think that breaks apart in a relationship. Well, when Rich had cancer, it's like I said, it's like you feel like you lost part of your life, your partner in life. And it just made us get stronger.
Because I'd walk up and down those hospital floors and I'd realize, there's always going to be someone that's worse off than you are, no matter what it is in life. But as I glanced in those rooms, what I saw, I couldn't get those pictures out of my mind. And that was cancer patients sitting in there. Some of them were taking their last breath in that hospital room, and they were doing it all alone. There was no one there for you. And so that totally just tugged on my heartstrings, and I realized something needed to be done. I reached out and founded an organization called Phil's Friends. And what we do is we provide support and hope to people that are going through cancer. And we do it in a few ways. We have 2 ways of distributing these care packages that we send out. One is by visiting people in hospitals on their bedside, letting them know they're not alone and just being a listening ear to them. And the other way is shipping them free of charge to show up on people's doorsteps across the United States in a decorated box. We have separate care packages for men, for women, for kids, and for teens. They go out in a decorated box. There's blankets and journals and crossword puzzles and Sudoku books and water bottles and just special mouthwash when people get mouth sores. And so it's about $50 worth of items that say, hey, we love you. We're with you during this. You're not alone. And once those care packages go out, whether in the hospital or by shipping them to any of the 50 states across the country, then we start sending weekly cards of encouragement through our Cards of Hope program. We grew from visiting a very young, brain cancer patient named Jenna, who was 4 years old during the time, and now we're supporting 5,000 cancer patients and their families every single week across the United States.
It was a long 2-year journey that we battled through cancer, but as we walked through that, Phil's life just turned from about himself to about others. So it was really neat to see that selflessness take place in Phil. And now, we've been married 2 years, we've got 2 kids. It's an amazing journey that we've been on. And God just couldn't be in the middle of this anymore to see these precious little gifts that He's given us.
I feel like I have a huge opportunity with I don't want to call it a gift, but in some ways it is a gift to have cancer because I have a platform that most people don't have. When I talk about God and my faith, people tend to listen because I'm facing death. And they know that. And they think, how can you even function? How can you be happy and find joy when you're going through cancer for the 3rd time?
After that second surgery, she was doped up. She was out of it. It had been like a 6-hour surgery. She came back to the room. I was going to stay with her for several nights, those first nights. And so it's really late at night, and the nurse comes in, and she's talking to her. And she said, "You're so brave, you're so strong, what you're going through." And Sherry, out of the drug-induced haze, said, "It's not me, it's him." Huge smile on her face. You don't know what you're going to be like in that situation, but she has taught me just to believe, just to be faithful.
For me, the ultimate in life pursuit became marrying music and my faith. Music in missions, music in worship, and also seeing other arts released in worship and in missions as well. So I did go on to major in music in university in the oboe, which is a pretty rare instrument, but is a beautiful voice that God uses in miraculous ways. I was privileged to minister here in the U.S. and in many countries across the world with music, bringing the love of Jesus, bringing His word, His message, and really with a heart to raise worship and worshipers. At times it's very frightening. At times I think, wow, will I ever play again? Will I ever feel the wind of the Spirit blowing through me as I play over people in a prophetic way? Will I ever see healing come through music, through instruments?
If you don't know God, this is a perfect time to get to know Him, because even if you don't want to know Him, you're going to need Him. You're not going to be able to do this by yourself. You need someone at the end that's going to carry you. Just make Him your friend and just start talking to Him. It doesn't have to be anything great. It's just let Him know what's bothering you. Let Him know what you want. Let Him know what's hurting. And if you want to be angry with Him while you're talking, be angry with Him, but just have that relationship, because that's all He wants.
I think that people are scared to think about death and to really, I think people say, oh yeah, we can't wait to be to heaven, or they talk about it, but it's so real to me now. It's a place that I might go to a lot sooner than other people might go to. And I'm not so scared of it anymore. And that's just the Holy Spirit and working in my life. And it's God just, again, showering me so much with His love for me. He loves me more than anything. And I really know now that I can trust Him with everything, completely, 100%.
The biggest thing that I would probably tell a cancer patient is that, number one, you are never alone. You always have a God that loves you. And it might not seem like it, but you have a God that loves you and cares for you. And when you read God's Word, you can take that upon yourself to read God's Word and see what you think, about it. But I don't think you'd ever regret it. Having that there, learning how to pray, being able to focus and, just reach out to God and be real, with yourself. So I think all the fakeness and the facade that you've maybe built up in your life will disappear, and you'll really discover, who you are while you're going through this cancer journey.